morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. I'm Tim Ortez of the Weingart Foundation, and I'm joined today by three leaders in the investment field. I'll ask each of them to introduce themselves momentarily, but for those in our audience who might not be familiar with the work of the Weingart Foundation, we're a private grant-making foundation committed to the advancement of racial, social, and economic justice. Since our inception, we've provided over $1.6 billion in support to thousands of nonprofit organizations across Southern California. In early 2016, our board of directors made a commitment to base all of our policy and program decisions on advancing fairness, inclusion, and opportunity for all, especially those communities of color hit hardest by persistent inequality. We call this our equity commitment. Soon after this decision was made, I was tasked or challenged with the task of operationalizing this equity commitment to our investment portfolio. As we were learning about the complexities of mission-aligned investing and helping our board identify which investments we had that they felt were inconsistent or ran contrary with our mission and values, we became intrigued, or maybe more determined, with the concept of leading systemic change to the use of catalytic capital, or what some might call impact investing. We were particularly focused on the wealth gap and the process or cycle of wealth creation. We theorized that if one could influence who creates wealth, assuming diverse managers are likely to have diverse teams, this distribution of wealth would change. So with the help of our investment advisors, we modified our investment evaluation framework, which would influence who we chose to work with and what we would choose to invest in. First, our grant making and supporting of our nonprofit community remained a top priority for us. This is represented as our alpha bucket. Secondly, we wanted to work with partners that shared our values of diversity and inclusion. Third, if we prioritize investments where our dollars could have a positive impact, particularly for women and communities of color, we could leverage our investments to advance our mission. This is the area where our three priorities intersect. To start in the middle, this is our sweet spot. Today, I'm joined by three of our investment partners to help us reflect on what has been a 7-year journey, as well as discuss some opportunities in the future. Now, I'll invite each of our investment partners to introduce themselves and share a little bit more detail about their firms and their mission. Starting with Ada of iimpact Capital. Ada, would you tell us a little bit more about your firm's mission and what it sets out to do?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tim, for the introduction, and thanks everyone for joining us. My name is Ada Arevalo, and I'm the founder and CEO of iimpact Capital. And quite simplistically, iimpact is a purpose-driven ecosystem that leverages real estate funds to change the fact that in a $20 trillion industry, which is commercial real estate, women own and manage less than 1.7%. And women of color are immaterial participants to that statistic. So our goal and my personal mission is to create opportunity for the women leaders that are in commercial real estate and give them a chance to be able to do what they do best. Pertinent to our conversation, and very saddened by the fact that iimpact is the first and only Latina-led fund in commercial real estate as well. So I'm privileged to be here having this conversation with you.
Arturo, would you please tell us a little about yourself, your firm, and your mission?
Yes, thank you, Tim. Thanks to the Weingart Foundation for having this conversation and the intelligence and clarity of your mission. So Primestor is a firm my partner Leandro and I started about 33 years ago. And we didn't even know impact was something. we set out the firm to focus on creating change and bringing economic vitality to communities of color, starting in South Los Angeles, right before and then during the Rodney King civil unrest. Through that experience, what we've done is we have brought economic vitality to communities through investment, through local hiring, creating local economic jobs, local economic development, investment where communities have been neglected, very focused on food deserts and bringing full service grocery, drug stores to communities that needed banking services and the like. And as of recent years, due to the expansion of the public transportation system in Southern California particularly, we have begun to do some pretty large projects on mixed use investment where we can mix affordability of housing, market rate housing, with sites that have access to public transportation and retail combined. The firm is comprised today of, thankfully for us, individuals who have been with the firm for nearly 30 years, who come from these communities and every day bring love, passion to the effort. And we are seeing a lot of incredible growth and opportunity in those markets where retailers and businesses are very interested in bringing capital and bringing those, because they understand that their markets are so underserved and there's so much loyalty in these communities that they see incredible opportunity. So the dialogue, the timing of this couldn't be better.
Thank you, Arturo. David, you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Thank you very much, Tim and the Vanguard Foundation, for inviting me to participate. My name is David Perez. I'm one of the co-founders and managing partners of Avance Investment Management. We are a private equity firm investing in the lower middle market in the US, manage about $1 billion or so. We were started by a team of founders who have been in this industry for over 25 years. Our main goal is to provide attractive risk-adjusted returns to institutional investors, mostly retirees and foundations all across the country and the world. But in addition, what we've done throughout our careers perhaps is in some ways pioneered a way of investing where we've been able to find and invest into companies that have been started or led by, in our case, Hispanic entrepreneurs throughout the country. As you all know, Hispanics account for close to 20% of the population in the US. They happen to be a very entrepreneurial cohort within our population, and yet the amount of capital that the institutional investment community has invested with this group is minuscule. I mean, it's less than 1% of the capital, way less than 1% of the capital in our industry. So what we've been able to do has been not only achieve our main goal of providing such returns, but in some ways identify some of the most entrepreneurial and successful teams within our market and invest in them and grow those companies into larger, successful companies that have become then leading players in their spaces, in some cases continue to be, providing excellent services. So in some ways, Tim, we achieved sort of the dual goal of return objectives plus making a real impact. And in our case, we think about wealth creation as a very important tool of this impact we're creating.
Thank you, David. I appreciate your perspective. Now, shifting gears a little bit, I'd like to ask each of you about your personal journeys. Ada, if you don't mind going first again, share a little bit about what this means to you personally to lead this work.
What this means to me to do this type of work. And I love that question because we've had this conversation, right? So this is, to me, the biggest opportunity to create a legacy and leave something behind for other generations to continue to do the work, the good work forward. As you know, so I migrated to the United States when I was 10 years old. I was born and raised in Mexico. I came to East LA, which was then, very much a crime-stricken community. It was very hard to go to school, a first-generation college attendee. So all of that hard work is really what set me up to do what I want to do today with iimpact. Right. My personal journey and experience, having been a women executive for over a decade in a very male dominated industry, would set me up to do what I do today. So from a personal perspective, I want to build opportunity, but more importantly, I want to inspire the next generation to understand that there is so much that can be done. And if, this immigrant an East LA girl can achieve and create something meaningful and transformative, they can too.
Thank you, Ada. Arturo, could you please tell us a little bit about your own personal journey and what this work means to you to lead it?
Yeah, I mean, I came from Mexico City in '86, and I really discovered an entire sort of world that was a surprise to me. I came here looking for going to college or work. I didn't quite know. I ended up just working full time in a restaurant for many years, and there I met what really became my life's passion, which is activism. I think we use real estate as a form of transformation. It's a tool. We call ourselves developers, but frankly, we are facilitators. And that to me means that we find a great group of people that make up Primestor, where we find the tools available with folks like yourselves to say we can bring about what a community is asking of us, what it is that they want, what they need, what it is that they're passionate about, and then bring those tools to the table. And for me personally, it just never was any other way. I don't understand the business world when it doesn't have the do well and do good environment in it, because I do think that the future of our nation that as we see what's going on around the world today, continues to need to be a leader in what is possible, and that is by empowering the majority of people that live in this country. And when I see the future of minorities in the U.S. and when I discovered the sort of the history that sort of redlined and didn't allow opportunity evenly, it was an incredible moment of frustration that propelled me to do something with my partner and the business. To me, every day, the specificity of your question is, to me personally, what I love the most is interacting in the community, having focus groups, dialogue about how do we empower you as a community to achieve in your community what you want and what you think is possible, not to be the group that comes in and says, well, this is how you should do it or what you should do it. Think of us as a tool to help bring about change with a very focused outcome of economic opportunity from within. Too long, our communities have had an adage of, what is my ticket out? And I want the dialogue to change to say, this is a community that I want to stay in, and now I'm going to be a part of that change.
Thank you, Arturo. We see things a lot alike. I see a common thread. David, if I may ask, please, would you mind sharing what this work means to you to lead it?
Of course, and I have a similar story to tell. I'm also an immigrant, came without a penny in my pocket, and sort of started my career here after college. And to me, it brings meaning to life. We used to say, when you look yourself at the mirror, and now in the world of Zoom, you look at yourself in Zoom, you look at the person in front of you, and you ask yourself, so what do you want that person to be remembered for? And in my case, I think to the extent I can create economic opportunities and real wealth creation opportunities for our community and folks that don't have necessarily those opportunities and don't get looked at the same way, and that means a lot to me, Tim. I remember now almost 20 years ago when I started this working at a much bigger private equity firm and dealing with a firm that was very successful. I was looking for capital, and that team walked into the boardroom of a group of people that looked nothing like them. And even though they were successful, when people looked at them, no one could understood, when they went to college. They went to college in Mexico, and they had other experience, and so they couldn't connect. And for them, that meant, they're not going to get capital. And for me, that meant opportunity. I meant like if you identify people with talented, driven people come of all places, and within our community, we have plenty of them. So to the extent what my job, what I'm excited about my job is that I meet a lot of them with the drive, the opportunity, the tenacity. Just the immigrant route, by the way, it's a tremendous screening mechanism, sort of to be able to give away everything you have and pursue an opportunity in another country. That takes drive. So I'm incredibly excited about what I do. To the extent I can look behind and see people that have had success, that have generated wealth, and in most cases, by the way, are tremendously impactful in their communities. They give jobs, give opportunities to others. So the multiplier effect that you get through a lot of the work that I think we do here as a panel is tremendous. So that gets me super excited.
Thank you, David. Now, how does working with Weingart influence or advance your firm's strategy or approach? Ada, can you speak to that?
Absolutely. And you know what, before I do, I want to just highlight something that both Arturo and David just said, which is, and I didn't realize the fact that all three of us are immigrants, and there's something that comes with being an immigrant. And David, you said it great, the drive, the tenacity, the grit, right? We all gave up the community, the life, the family, the people that we knew in search of the American dream. That in and of itself is probably the biggest success that we could talk about from a personal perspective, right? So I wanted to commend you for bringing that up and just highlighting that for the rest of the audience. So Tim, to your question about how does working with Weingart help in our journey and what has that process been? First and foremost, I got to tell you, obviously, it's so easy to connect with someone that you could relate to. Tim, you're Latino. You already kind of understand the journey that we're coming from, right? So it's great to have that openness from the team, to have the support, because you and the rest of the Weingart team are truly dedicated to building something different, understanding that doing the same thing over and over again is not going to yield a different result, right? So we definitely have to do something different. Your support and your focus and your drive to bring that forward, not just within Weingart and your own investment committee, but with other organizations, with your peers, right? To say, you should be looking at these strategies. They're building change. They're building the difference that we want to see in our communities. I think that takes a very special team. For me, Weingart has been instrumental and transformative, because I'll tell you that the biggest barrier to entry, generally speaking, is capital. And we talk about that all the time, whether it be fund capital, whether it be working capital, whether it be investment capital. It's capital as a whole that's the biggest barrier to entry. And when we analyze the fact that starting a fund management business, which Arturo and David are also involved in, it takes millions of dollars to start a fund management company. So you either partner with a major organization, or it takes decades to accumulate the wealth to be able to start a fund management company. And it takes partners like Weingart that understand the vision and the systems change to support organizations like iimpact that had neither or did not pursue either of those specific paths, and give us an opportunity to create the change we want to see in our industry.
Thank you, Ada. Arturo, you want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I think leading by example, I think is the lesson that I learned. I think when Weingarten took it upon itself to look at its history and look at its foundation and look at where it started and where it's going, made us sort of self-reflect and say, okay, we also always got to be checking into what our values are, what we stand for. That sort of discipline of identifying every time you're sort of, okay, let's relook at our values. Let's look internally. I think that was incredibly inspiring from the organization. And frankly, the due diligence process that we went through gave us an opportunity to be better, right? And so the questions that are asked by Weingart, the process of going through identifying our values are aligned, our goals are aligned, the objectives are aligned, checking sort of, are you in the right track? And the fact is, we have built a business that has gotten better by example and by finding A quality operators that have the do well and do good always present. And Weingart certainly elevated us as a firm and does so on an ongoing basis. I think that, needless to say, what Ada mentioned is a foregone conclusion. You know, just the fact that there's an awareness and a willingness and a focus to bring capital in a very specific agenda is a must. And without that, we wouldn't be where we are. But I think on the practical day-to-day, sort of the nuts and bolts of it, it was an incredible process for us. It's an ongoing relationship where we check that on an ongoing basis. I think that makes also folks like ourselves, and I personally, I had to pick the path of work to survive. So college wasn't something for me, and most of my team here has been through that opportunity. But it is for me an education, being partners with yourselves as well. So I echo what Ada said, and also that process I think has been super educational.
Thank you, Arturo. David, I know you come from a little bit different sector, but tell us, how does Weingart maybe influence or advance your strategy?
Thank you, Tim. I mean, for everyone here, Weingart, you have an amazing reputation. Just to start in our business, people look at who are your investors and who's trusted you with their capital, and the thought leadership and position you occupy in your industry, Tim, is just phenomenal. And the fact that you were comfortable with coming into our fund, and we had a like-minded purpose that really resonated, and we were able to attract other investors. I think we were able to attract over a dozen other endowments and foundations that came into our fund, in addition to a fair bit of larger state pension plans and others. But I mean, that really had a what I would call a door opening effect. And in fact, and that is what I like about our partnership. I mean, you've in many ways have backed us and opened the doors to us to be successful. Our job is to obviously generate returns to you, but in turn open the doors to other entrepreneurs, and many entrepreneurs that are starved for capital. So I very much, back to having meaning in life. I like not only having meaning in what I do with the capital, but I love having people whose capital I manage that can do something with that capital. So to the extent I can turn $1 into 2 or 3 or 4, and you can use it to back other folks that are in this panel or be here in the future, that's just the multiplier that your actions can have, sort of what I call upstream and downstream into the entire society. So very, very, very humble and thrilled to have you as an important backer of our firm.
Thank you, David. That's the multiplier effect we're hoping that we make. Now I'm going to change gears a little bit and look to the future, and thinking about, how can other foundations, how can philanthropy make more impact with their investments, whether it's doing what we do or doing something different. I'm going to start with you, Ada, but please invite the rest of the panel, just to jump in. What are the opportunities that out there where philanthropy can make more impact? Ada?
Absolutely. And there are so many. And the reality is that I would love for more foundations to follow in the footsteps of Weingart, right? So you mentioned earlier in our conversation how Weingart has aligned their endowment to their mission, right? I think there's still an opportunity for many foundations to do so, whereby allowing impact investments that are risk aligned or performance aligned to be supported or support them in a higher capacity. But going into a little bit more detail, I would personally love to see more PRIs going into trailblazing organizations. So Weingart did this phenomenally, and I would love to see this more, where iimpact is a for-profit organization. We were able to get an investment approval from Weingart because of the impact, because of what we're looking to accomplish. I don't know of many other trailblazing organizations that are not, or that are for profit, that have had that opportunity or know of that opportunity, or foundations that offer that PRI opportunity for trailblazing organizations. So when I mentioned earlier that we can't continue to do the same thing and expect different results, that's exactly what I would love to see. I would love to see a lot more PRI capital to build the organizations that are enacting change and give them an opportunity to do so.
And just to jump in a little bit to explain for some of those who might not be familiar with program-related investments, you're referring to PRIs. It's a tool we use to get around some of the IRS constraints around what might be considered otherwise jeopardizing investments. We can take a bit more risk because some opportunities are more focused on the programmatic goals, or we're looking for the returns in terms of social returns.
Mm-hmm.
So, and in any event, I just wanted to explain that. Arturo, were you going to add something?
Yeah, I think, we consider sort of the next evolution and something that I think is achievable that wasn't achievable 30 some years ago, or at least to us, or wasn't something that we understood exactly how to create. But home ownership and business ownership, small business ownership, is so important in our community, sort of what I consider sort of the next goal within our organization, the holy grail, so to speak, to create long-term wealth in the community. And it's going through larger vehicles that can be held accountable for the performance of the investments, and facilitating sort of segregated capital to go into those buckets with oversight management, right? So you have a very, very robust diligence process that is, I think, difficult for smaller organizations or much smaller teams. I would love to see foundations sort of segregate components of capital and say, look, we're going to hold both the manager accountable for that as well. We've done a very significant amount of urban development in the retail, medical, social services fields. And where we do find a lot of shortcomings is when you've got the mom and pop, so to speak, business, or the startup where you've got an amazing cook or a chef or somebody that's had a lot of experience in a certain role within another business and they want to open their own. That distance and the comfort, as was mentioned in the panel earlier, just to have the courage to say, okay, I've got what it takes, or I have now a family, a relative that went to college that understands how to write a business plan. I can do the operations, but now I've got support. Capital is the biggest constraint. And I think there's a vehicle there to use both the establishment of a manager, a capital manager that has capital, and hold them accountable and kind of hold each other's hands to bring this micro capital opportunity, because that is what I think will build community long term, is when ownership is truly held in the neighborhood in small business. We do it through procurement. We manage and operate all of our assets. So we go out and hire for landscaping or for security or for maintenance. And our goal is always to identify, do we have a local provider, or can we facilitate the formation of a local provider with our own contracts, so that we can create a path to business ownership and eventually home ownership, which is, I think, the ultimate goal in our communities.
Yeah, I think we've all talked about before, home ownership or real estate, ownership of real estate is one of the surest pathways to wealth accumulation, to the extent we can help other communities that suffer from inequality access that pathway, ensures tries to solve some of the inequalities. David, do you have any thoughts?
I mean, I would echo what was said. To me, capital formation is this country. We live in a great country, but capitalism relies on capital and access to capital. So how do we think about the role that organizations such as yours and mine and others can play? Is how do we help people build those capital formations? And I think you start very simple, and you look at yourself as an individual. Who are you using as your accountant, as your this, as your that, are you just going with the bigger brand because that's the bigger brand? Are you yourself opening doors? I mean, everyone who makes an income access expenses, right? So you start at the very fundamental level. Who are your vendors? Are you giving opportunities? Even within bigger vendors, who are the people you deal with? Who are the ones that are getting credit for your business? Are you making sure that people that look like you are servants to you, or are you not? Are you just putting a blind eye and relying on other factors? So I think you start very simple, and then as you're making more and more decisions that generate wealth, you continue to keep an eye on it. I like the critical mass concept and the role that you can play, Tim, and other back to the role you play with us as you team up with people. You give them. You open doors for them as to what you do in the future. And I would echo the same thing. Everyone in this panel, Arturo, and others listening when you make decisions as to how you deploy your capital, you're opening doors for them, you're giving the business. So make sure that as you're doing those, you're not, you're being consistent with your principles. So you yourself want to do it, but then go ahead and do it at the micro level. Every day you're making capital spending decisions, whether it's at your home, at your work of business, and your whatever you are. So keep that in mind, because those decisions accumulate and are very important.
Your who you select to work with has to be deliberate and intentional, and I think that's what we do a good job of at Weingart. As I mentioned earlier, thinking about who we want to partner with, who reflects our values, and then of course, how we can make impact. I'm going to switch. We have some time now to switch to some questions from the audience. One question: how does the investment sector help the nonprofit sector serve the BIPOC community?
I'm happy to start with my thoughts on that, and of course get Arturo and David's thoughts on it as well. In my opinion, in order to create long-lasting change, we need to build PPP partnerships, right? So it's public, private, and philanthropic partnerships. There's a very unique place that nonprofits fill or utilize in the investment ecosystem. And I think for-profit organizations, especially investment organizations that invest in real estate, which is an asset class that touches people in a very unique way on an everyday life. And when you talk about housing, like Arturo and I know very intimately, it all starts with housing, right? When people have stable and affordable housing, they have better healthcare, better education, overall more odds of having a successful life, whatever that may look like for them. So I really think that we need to do a better job. And I know that this is more of a broad answer, but we need to do a better job as investment professionals to collaborate in an ecosystem with the nonprofit organizations that can help drive our mission. And I know Primestor is a great example of that. And I'm sure David has other experiences as well in instances where he does that. But I think nonprofits also have to do more to collaborate or to search for the investment professionals and give us other opportunities that we might not even know of or have thought of yet, and not necessarily wait for us to reach out to them. And together we can create more lasting impact.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think the other place where we find a lot, to Ada's point relating to housing, I think one of the other places we find a lot of opportunity is in infrastructure. There is just a significant disconnect between what certain neighborhoods consider adequate infrastructure and then what we find in our communities, whether it is environmental remediation, whether it's basic sewer and storm water capacity, sidewalk access, pedestrian access. Those are all areas where philanthropy can play an important role, because it is, at the end of the day, there is a capital stack issue where you would consider that building in a certain urban setting is the same everywhere, but it really isn't. When you look at, we've had projects where we just want to go from a single story underutilized parcel to a denser facility. And I'm not talking major density, I'm talking basic density. And there just isn't enough there to make it function. And so there is a gap then that comes into play just to normalize, equalize the field for opportunity. So that's a very specific example where I think it comes into play materially on a day-to-day basis.
What about you, David?
And so from our perspective, we, as you know, we're more of a private equity investor, and the way we look at opportunity sets and the impact that we could create, with regards to making this impact with these entrepreneurs is in two different ways. We looked at businesses that provide products or services that are focused on the growth of our community. And when I started doing this 20 years ago, some people thought that that's, oh, you're only invested in people who make tortillas and other products, food services to the community. And that was the case. We did a few of those deals that did very well. But what we found over time is that anywhere you look, there's opportunities. We invested in folks providing financial services and insurance and whatnot. And many of these industries, what's really interesting, many of these industries, what you find is that they're growing. The ability to gain people's trust, by the way, is very important. So the ability to provide a real service of quality and gain folks' trust is very important. And the affinity that you have within our community is a very important building aspect of that trust that you can create. So we've invested in financial services, healthcare services, and many other services that have been, focused on the growth of our community. And then, there are entrepreneurs that have done anything. You find, as I mentioned in the beginning, incredibly talented entrepreneurs that have bootstrapped their businesses and at a juncture where they need capital to take it to the next level. And we've been fortunate to have had the opportunity to back them to, in our case, take a stake in their companies and be a thought partner and a real partner and help them grow their businesses, over time. In some of this impact, as I mentioned, capital formation, I'm very proud of the amount of capital that we've been able to return, not only to, folks like Tim and others, in terms of investors in private funds, but also in the amount of wealth that some of this, Hispanic entrepreneurs have made as well, because they themselves have become then funders of many of these other endeavors within their communities. And whether it's in California and Texas and Florida and Illinois, in New York, we've been able to do it everywhere. Backing in many cases, immigrant entrepreneurs, born in Texas, born in California, all kinds of entrepreneurs. And I think coming with the background Ada mentioned, the entrepreneur, and Arturo, and having that joint experience of grit and perseverance is something that's attracted many of them to team up with us. So that's been how we've been able to manifest that impact.
So if I can ask you, David, I am super curious from a private equity perspective, maybe not you yourself, but do some of the organizations that you support or that you fund also work with nonprofit organizations? So I could think of a friend of mine that has a startup, and they partner with a nonprofit organization that helps them to hire BIPOC individuals, right? So in order to have a more diverse talent pool, do the organizations that you support continuously, or at least look for the opportunities to partner with nonprofits?
We've been, get fortunate to partner in terms of the non-for-profit. We've done a lot on education, back in organizations such as the Hispanic Scholarship Fund. So first generation folks getting into college has been a big focus. Then over time, there's another one called C.E.O, creating opportunities in financial services. Twigo has been another one, then get into graduate school. That's been a big focus of ours over time. I am the prior chair of the NAIC, which is the National Association of Diverse Owned Private Equity Managers. So a lot of what I've done is advocate on behalf of the industry so that other folks have, other institutional investors see the value and the returns that this group of people have generated. I've been involved with Ballet Hispanico, which is the leading arts organization, ballet company in the country, of Hispanic, descent for over 20 years. So very, very, very thrilled, and it's been a humbling experience. So those are the kind of things that I've done to date. I haven't specifically focused on that, but I think many of the folks that we back have had an indirect impact in the areas that you're describing.
Along those lines, I'd like to continue on with that thought, David. One question we had from the audience is it important to assemble a team of outside professional advisors who are similarly aligned with your mission, either culturally or otherwise? Like ask anyone to jump in. Certainly we felt it was important to work with partners that we felt were aligned with our mission and values. But I'd like to get your thoughts.
I mean, on our end, we have an annual procurement process that just basically looks at all of the aspects of a business. And in that analysis, we include ownership, we include their values, we understand what are their sort of practices in terms of how they hire and how they integrate to society in general. And it is one of the filters, right? So it is an element we take into account. Over the years, we have been blessed to find incredible opportunities to partner up and hire and engage a team, as is asked specifically in the question. Yes, I think that also to scale, you're not going to be able to sort of support an organization that has all of these executive functions in-house. And you create a very broad network by having an ability to outsource certain functions. And by choosing that, as Ada was asking sort of David about the ability to sort of create a spoken wheel kind of a strategy where what you do ripple effect across the industry by having that as a selection process. So we've done that. I do think that it is an important tool to keep in mind. And I also think we do a service to our own community by being very diligent in what the expectation is, right? And seeing our community always has responded. I've done focus groups for 30 years, whether you talk to middle school kids all the way through college and then working professionals. Every time you hear is, look, what we don't want is just charity. It's a perpetuating situation. Give us opportunity, give us tools, give us just access. And when you don't have a pretty high level standard when you ask these things, then you're doing a disservice to it all as well. So I think it's elevating everybody by holding yourself to a high standard and by asking that of your partners and your consultants.
I'm gonna echo what Arturo just said. And the only thing I would add is that for me, having an advisory board as a nonprofit, as a for-profit, is extremely important, right? Because as you are in the work, even as a leader, as you are in the work, you're in your team, sometimes it's hard to step away and see the bigger picture because you're in the work, right? But I do want to highlight a differentiator between what we're talking about. Alignment does not equal agreement, right? So agreement is having the same opinion. Alignment is having the same values. So it is extremely important to have team alignment, advisory board alignment, investment committee alignment, but not to have agreement. That's when you build, what we've unfortunately developed in our industries for so long, which is kind of the yes mentality of everybody thinks the same way, and it's so hard to think outside the box. So to your original question of is it important to have external advisors that are aligned with your values? Absolutely. It's extremely important to have alignment, but not to have agreement or group mentality.
That's him, and I mean, I completely agree with everything. I sort of the way I do it is, you have a formal advisory board that you rely for some decisions, but I like to have a team of people that I rely on to bounce off anything, informal. I think when you read the Wall Street Journal, I forgot they still have it once a week that they portray these famous people and they go like, who's your board of directors? Obviously no one has a formal board of directors, but that means who is the group of people that you go to when you have a very, thorny situation where you have to decide on something, whether it's personal or business or anything. And I think that to me is an important part. The people rely, who are the people that you talk to, whose advice you seek and whose advice you get, frankly, and that tells you a lot about. And the other thing that I like, by the way, is when I look at people's LinkedIn pages, oftentimes people like to talk about kind of pump their chest and talk about all the things that they've done, all the colleges that they've done, whatever their journey. I like to see what they do for others. So I kind of go to the other interests and, volunteer, and I click open those and I see what they've listed and what they do. Because oftentimes that part of LinkedIn tells me a lot more about anyone than the part that just talks about credentials and places they've worked on. That where you spend your time on a voluntary basis, that tells a lot about someone. So I look at that as a guide to form an opinion about anyone's character. So there you go. So a piece of advice for everyone: look at LinkedIn, not the jobs and not the colleges. Look at what people do for other people.
I like that, David. Another question from the audience. David, I'm going to start with you for this one because I think this is really relevant to what you do. But can you share a bit about what types of companies you look to invest in, or maybe who you choose to invest in might be a better wording.
Right. So as I mentioned, we have a big focus on founder-owned companies that have, got into a certain level, and then we help them. I'll give you one example. This is all public on our website, but we backed a company called Univista Insurance. Is a company that provides, insurance services to the Hispanic community in Southern Florida and now in Texas. Well, watch out, California. We're coming there next. But the company's been in business for about 20 years, started by some, Hispanic immigrants as well. And we're able to team up with them and just, as I said, help get the business to the next level. In that case, it involved pushing harder into healthcare and other types of policies, opening doors with other insurance companies or carriers, helping them develop a managing general agency, which is an MGA, which helps essentially be able to underwrite and bind their own policies with their customers. And we were able to, again, help professionalize and institutionalize that business, get a CFO in place, get a head of the NGA, get a head of franchising, get a head of open up Texas through prior relationships that we've had. So it's traditionally companies that are at that similar juncture where someone has taken it from founding to a level of critical mass. Then we invest our investors' capital and our own into that company and help put in place the resources and the strategy to take them through that next avenue of growth. We create equity incentive programs for the next generation of management, so to be able to share in that wealth creation. We pay very close attention to make sure that whatever we're delivering is a good and fair service. So full disclosure, we particularly since we provide services to our community. In that case, for example, we've been backing the growth of the Obamacare policies, which have become an important part of the health delivery framework for our community, and they were not embraced initially, but they have been right now, and working with legislators also to make sure when there are kinks and other things that are not working, to make sure that we work through that. So that's an example of the kind of situation where we go in, team up with them. This partnership in this case started in the summer of 21, so we've been partners now for 2.5 years, and we're very excited about what we're doing and the future prospects here.
Switching gears a little bit, Ada, I'm going to direct this to you. A question from our audience: What do you see as your ability to influence impact-first investments?
Oh, and it's not unique to me. So I'll start by saying this is not unique to me. Everything that we do, every choice that we make has impact, right? It's just your choice whether it's going to be positive, negative, or circumstantial. So iimpact specifically, though, and by the way, I'll give a little background story on how the name even came to be. It was real because I just made that comment. It was realizing that every choice that we make has an impact. So iimpact, the name of the organization that I founded, is founded on that premise, right? That everything that we do makes an impact. So when thinking about how can we influence the positive impact that we make in the community, I think we're very strategically placed to do so because we've utilized an allocator model rather than a direct investment model. We can be a steward of the investment for all of the stakeholders. That means we can be a steward of the investment and fiduciary for our investors, just as much as we can be a steward and fiduciary for the communities and our investment partners, right? And I think that was very strategic in how we created the organization and the structure. But aside from that very particular case that we were very intentional on, I would highly urge everyone to step back and understand that everything that we do in business and in our personal life, even in our political choices, right, will ultimately have an impact in the community and the families and in the investments that we're looking to make.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to wrap up this session. I want to thank all of my panelists, Ada, Arturo, Dave. Thank you for joining us here this morning. I think we've had a very robust conversation, and I appreciate all of you being Weingard's partners. So thank you for your mission and your commitment to helping our community. So with that, I think we're going to close. Thank you all.
Thank you.